And it's still early days in 2025, but the trading year is moving on quite fast at this point. And investors, savvy investors, be wondering where they're going to be stashing cash into, in 2025. Some might be sitting on the sidelines watching things, play out. But we always need to make that investment decision. But to help us unpack what to expect in 2025, we have Mr. Olatunde Amolegbe, the MD, Arthur Stephen Asset Management Company Limited. Join me right here in the studio. It's great to have you, sir. Happy New Year.
Thank you for having me, Ladi. Happy New Year.
So, it's a year, like I remember the previous years, when they started, investors were wondering, what's going to play out next? What is that investment class that I should be looking out so I don't miss out, on some of the profit, coming up? But talk to me about economic policies that will shape the investment landscape in Nigeria in 2025.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, in 2025 is always going to be all about inflation.
Right.
What are we doing to continue to curb inflation? Because there's no analyst that will argue that 34% inflation rate is acceptable. So the things we're doing to ensure that we try to bring that down will be crucial to any investment that anybody is making for 2025. So how do you ensure that those factors that are contributing to inflation are curbed? Issues such as FX market instabilities and the likes, issues around energy costs, issues around inadequate infrastructure, issues around insecurity. How do you ensure that you put in place policies that controls all of that and gradually starts to bring down your inflation? If your inflation starts dropping, then various sectors that are impacted by these inflations can start, easing a sigh of relief. So sectors such as the industrials, such sectors such as consumer goods sector, that have been heavily hit by issues around FX devaluation, issues around high interest rates, can start easing a sigh of relief, and we can start seeing growth, across sector. What has happened 2024 is that if you look at, yes, our GDP did rise 3.4% thereabout. It's projected to go up to about 3.5% for 2025, but what we saw was an uneven growth across sectors. So you saw sectors such as the oil and gas sector growing. You saw such sectors such as the finance sector growing, particularly in 2024. But the industrials, the consumer goods, those suffered significantly in 2024. But if you continue with policies that stabilize the FX market, for instance, and possibly start to bring down the exchange rate a little bit, if we are able to continue in that trajectory in bringing down energy costs, so the pump price starts to come down, and hopefully that impacts transportation too, then the transport cost comes down. Insecurity, we get a handle on that so that farmers can go back to the market and produce food. Food inflation starts to come down. Then those kind of sectors can also benefit. Then we can now see a relatively even growth across sectors in the economy, and then the kind of
with the picture you painted, it seems like you're just working with a console, and you have the volumes for each of these macroeconomic indicators, and you just pull down inflation, pull down the exchange rate.
Yes.
It would be great if it was that straightforward. But we've been seeing action from the Central Bank of Nigeria. How are you seeing, some of the moves, so far, from CBN?
I've said it in the past. The CBN's business isn't to be allocating resources. The CBN's business isn't to be choosing winners and losers within an economy. The primary focus or the primary duty of the CBN is to stabilize prices in a market economy. All right, so I guess we are a little bit lucky now that we have the management at the CBN returning to that focus of price stability, because we're in a market economy. We're supposed to give even chance for all the players in the economy an opportunity to thrive. But when you now have a situation where the CBN took on the role of allocating resources, selecting which industry or which sector they are going to bail out, or which sector they are going to stimulate, that is not right. But now we are back to the traditional role of the CBN, which is price stability. So they are putting in place measures that stabilize the FX market, that ensures that every player in the market has a fair shot of succeeding. Then we're going to see growth. And the truth of the matter is that some of the challenges we're having now did not start overnight. Some of the policies they are putting in place are not going to solve the problem overnight either. So we're going to have to give them time and give them a chance to work themselves through the system and actually start to make a positive impact. So we are not going to expect the exchange rate to just drop overnight. It's going to happen. In fact, what we're going to see is a situation where we're going to achieve stability first, before we can now start seeing maybe a strengthening of the naira. Energy prices is going to also become stable before we can see a reduction. All of that, along with some other fiscal issues, will ultimately start impacting inflation. And if inflation starts to drop, then we should see a positive impact on the economy, and more importantly, positive impact on the lives of the citizens.
And with all of these headwinds were with us in 2023, 2024, but it seems investors were still better off. At the end of the day, even though the macroeconomic headwinds were quite negative, investors still cashed out. And would they get more this time, seeing that most of these indicators actually go in the right direction? On what sectors will profit in 2025?
If you look at if you harken back to 2024, as I'd mentioned, because of the uneven growth even in the market, you will see that the gains, though if you look at the chart, virtually all the sectors in the market recorded gains last year. But if you look at it, the gains were uneven. So, for instance, the oil and gas sector, was topped the market in terms of, price movements, followed by the finance sector. The expectation is that with some of this, the positive effects from some of these policies, then we're going to see more sectors start to join in that positive movement. So, for instance, the insurance sector, for instance, should be able to benefit in 2025. I've mentioned consumer goods sector. They've really taken a hit from FX issues, interest rates issues. By the time we start seeing stability in those fundamentals, then the consumer goods companies should also start doing well in 2025, hopefully. And of course, the industrials, like the Dangote cements of this world and all of that, should also benefit from those positive.
Because with some of the results we saw before, the FX losses were huge.
Absolutely.
So at some point, they might start to come down. And maybe no more FX losses.
So let me give you some typical example. If you look at the top gainers and the top losers in the chart for 2024, you will see companies such as MTN, such as big companies, huge companies, crucial companies to the economy, such as MTN, such as Nestle, all right, in the losers column. That typically shouldn't be the case. But of course, the issues of huge FX revaluation losses and huge finance costs, affected those companies. If you get a handle on some of those issues, then you could see those sort of bellwether companies starting to show their real value.
We've seen MTN already moving in that direction, somewhat at this time.
Absolutely, with the adjustment in tariffs, that coupled with the stabilization in terms of the general finance cost, should see them doing much better in 2025.
Right.
Maybe not necessarily reaching their full potential this year, but we should see them doing much.
All right, we're already seeing action, happening, even in the global space, with the tariff wars at this time. I'm sure investors are just watching and waiting to see where they will strike at this point. But so much, I'm looking forward to it. I guess it's going to be a very interesting one.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Mr. Olatunde Amolegbe is the MD of Arthur Stevens Asset Management, joining us right here at the trading floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, lady.
All right, so that's it from me on Business Morning. I'm going to have things over to the Sunrise Daily team. We'll be back at 1 p.m. to give you updates on what's playing out with most of the markets we track. Bye-bye.